Hey everyone, today for another vlog. I'm not really sure what I would give it the name it for today, but the theme for today is very clear for me. It's the sense that fire alone doesn't really build your life. In the sense that if you just focus on destroying what you don't like, or like trying to critique it, or trying to point out how it's all messed up, that doesn't really change much in an important way in terms of like what you add to your life, right? So you could say that fire is an important aspect in life, deconstruction on the negative, but by itself it's not really sufficient, right? On a really basic sense, what I mean is that for the last 2 years, I'd say I've been really like getting stuck in this mode of like deconstructing society or critiquing society and modernity and all of its problems for an important reason, which is the fact that I really don't like it. Uh, but the problem with all this is that it doesn't lead to anything. Like it's it's pretty straightforward. One of the thing that has been very clear for me, which has been useful in this work of this construction. Sorry, my nose is really stuffed, more so than usual. One important aspect of the work of deconstruction, I think, is that I've really like properly stayed away from anything to do with like hardcore consumer economy, right? So like really deriving your life from it and trying to live from with like a high standard of income, whatever. I think I'm quite comfortable with living on a very basic income of like something close to what is promoted in early retirement extreme. I do not know yet because obviously I've never lived on my own, but I'm ready to cook for myself. I don't care about having a car and so on and such. So I think that aspect was really important for me, like fitting the whole consumer economy. And I've never really written anything like super public. That's kind of the problem. Honestly, in a way, I'm kind of glad I never did because I think it would have even solidified that identity even more. But now I see that it's really not helpful by of itself. I think it's kind of like run its course of being useful, right? Like you quickly run into a state where it's you can kind of see the bullshit, but now like once you remove the bullshit of your life, then what do you have? Uh, well, that's like the other part, but like I had a series that I was on the making, which I stopped because for several reasons, but one of the reasons was that I didn't really embody any of the qualities I was talking about. Because obviously I was talking about the modern world, but I was still trying to find some type of thing that was better than it, right? But I didn't embody any of it, so I didn't really want to be a hypocrite. The second aspect is that I just didn't really enjoy making it, and I think in hindsight it's kind of obvious that when you critique the modern world and you spend a lot of time critiquing one thing, it just becomes really unenjoyable, right? Because you're basically spending your energy and your time on something that you don't enjoy, like thinking about something you don't enjoy, which is it's kind of obvious in hindsight, but now I can see why. Yeah, so the two things I was thinking of in that series, the main concept that started was, this distinction between freedom away and freedom towards. Freedom away mainly from constraints and the societal program. So all of the things we inherit from society unconsciously. Very important to see, right? But at this point of my life, now that I can see it a lot more clearly, I don't really see the point of writing about it more. Like, I don't know, like, maybe it could help people, but I'm not sure about that. I think I'd rather focus more on the freedom towards aspect, which is, building things. Building things because a key aspect that I mentioned in the series is that freedom is not the absence of constraints. It's more like the deliberate choice of your constraints. Because as a human being, you're inherently finite. And so, to be completely free of constraints, that doesn't really make sense for a finite being. But you can decide to choose what type of constraints, right? What type of game do you play? As a finite being, you always have to play a game, but you can choose to play much more conscious games, much more collaborative games, much more long-term games, right? So typically, the games that people are involved with are very unconscious. They're not even aware of the games they're playing, and they're very like short-term, zero-sum games, you could say. Not very don't lead to any real value besides winning over other people's finite resources. So that's like the key aspect of it, freedom towards as opposed to freedom away. And yeah, I made a lot of concepts in that series which I never published in a video. I have like 7 private videos of those which I've never made public. I think it was meant to be like a 15 or 20 video series, but I'm never gonna make it. I don't think I'm ever gonna really write about a critique of society or whatever, which I have been trying to do in the past. I have a lot of drafts and of posts, but I don't think I'm gonna publish any of them. For the simple reason that I don't think it adds any value for anyone, including myself. Uh, yeah, as I said, freedom away, freedom towards. At this point, it doesn't really add anything to my life, and I don't really think it will add anything to anyone else. I think it's better to just focus on what you want to see in life. It's just more important. And then, often when you try to pursue the things you want, often the obstacles that arise, right, that need to be dealt with. And that's inevitable. But like trying to like pursue these obstacles is completely senseless. Like there's so many examples of this where like you could think of like addiction or like trauma or like negativity or all that. Trying to remove all of those doesn't really make sense. It makes more sense to pursue the things you want and then to sort of address the obstacle that arises. Because then there is a reason for actually addressing the obstacle. Right? There's something that actually we want to see in life. But trying to remove something negative is really, there's something inherently really flawed about it. But it's like the example that Visa often gives is trying to not think of an elephant, of a pink elephant. I think that's rather appropriate because obviously that's not really how people work. Well, like if you tell a kid to not ride the bicycle towards that bush, then guess what? They're going to unconsciously go towards that bush. That's just how human intention works. Yeah, so something really flawed about negative goals, you could say, right? Like removing something. But there is value in the negative, right? In the broad sense of negative, not negative as in bad, but like negative as in removal and minimization and stuff, right? It's really important, right, to our entire life is shaped by the pull and push of those two forces, the active constructive force and the negative destroying force. The negative is really important. It's it's, if even something like rest is a form of negative, right? It's like the negation to the day of activity, right? Everyone needs rest. Everyone needs to slow down and to just sit and to do less things and to remove the things that don't work and so on. That's really important in life, right? I think you could completely imagine someone who never learns that and who they like start burning out or accumulating a lot of bad habits that really slow them down, or accumulating a lot of things in their life that they really don't need, and there's like this lifestyle inflation creeping in. So it's really important, this aspect of the negative, but like obviously, a balance is a key aspect of life, right? And obviously, if you lean too hard into the negative, then you don't really have enough to focus on the other side, which is just building more stuff, just adding the things you want to see in life. Having an attitude that looks at the world as a series of opportunities rather than like drudgery, like an opponent that is always against you and not such. That's like very like that's a very like a zero sum mindset where everything is a struggle for finite resource, right? As opposed to the world providing you with things you could build and relationships you could have. So yeah, that's kind of the struggle I've been having lately. Also the fact that I'm just really tired and confused. Like I don't really know what to use my energy on. But I think the move to slow down has been very beneficial. Just trying to do less. Trying to breathe better. This is one of the things sort of like prompted myself to kind of keep an eye on. Is to just generally remind myself to breathe better throughout the day. Breathing through the nose, because honestly, there's actually a huge difference between mouth breathing and nose breathing. like no meme. It's an actual thing. Like the whole thing about mouth breathing is actually real in my experience. At least, well, you could definitely breathe your mouth consciously, right? But something about the nose feels a lot more serene and deep. I do not know why, but experientially it feels true. So I'm gonna keep doing it. At least paying attention to my breath, right? Just being conscious of it is obviously important, as everything. Yeah, it's kind of the general thing. And I guess the thing I want to end with is like, it's like when I think about like what is the real societal problem going on right now, like people talk about like, you have the, the impending collapse of because of our unsustainable way of living based on oil, which is a finite resource, and the fact that we keep using more and more energy, right? That would be like the peak oil angle, or you have the angle of like the Metacrisis, if you're more familiar with that. Like the problems of society keep arising, and our ability to deal with them doesn't match the rhythm with which new problems arise. That's the Metacrisis. There's a crisis of crisis, if you will. That's the angle of that. Those are the two angles I found, and I can see that. But I think there's a sense in me which is like which is like a much more basic, which is that what can I see in the people around me? What that is the question of like the third angle. What can I see in the people around me, and what can I see in myself? And I think that the crisis that I can see in a very local sense is much more basic, in a way much more funny because it's kind of ridiculous to point it out. And this crisis is the fact that people are incredibly lonely and disconnected. It's as simple as that. It's as simple as that. That doesn't mean that peak oil and the meta crisis are not real. That's not what it means. It means that the felt experience as an individual of the real crisis, right? The real felt crisis, the one that you can feel it in your body, if you pay attention to it. It's this rupture. It's this like inner loneliness, and like not just being disconnected from other people, but in a sense really being disconnected from yourself as well, right? Like, you could call that inner loneliness. And I think you could have a theory about how those two first crises I just described create the first one, but that would be a theory, right? I think the real sense is much more basic, and I think it affects, I would suspect, the vast majority of people. This disconnect in themselves and with other people, and it's kind of funny. I mentioned that it's kind of laughable because in a way it's a lot more solvable than the first two, right? Like, how do you solve the first two? I have no fucking idea. I have no fucking idea how to solve the first two. The first two seem rather inherent about the way we run civilization. The fact that it's always, engaged in a power game, competing other, the fact that countries compete against one another, in a finite, again in a zero-sum game over the short term, that seems rather inherent to the civilization and the way humans scale behavior. But how do you solve the third one? Well, it's rather obvious, isn't it? You reach out to people. It's as simple as that. Um, Something very funny about tangible problems is the way the solutions are rather obvious. But at the same time, that doesn't mean that easy. But there's a way in which it also feels really deep, if you get what I mean. Like, the reason why I put those three on the same pedestal is because in a way they kind of feel the same from the inside, right? The first two are incredibly intellectual. As a result, they don't really feel anything. They can feel threatening because you start going to like catastrophes in your head. Like you start going to like awful scenarios that are going to happen in the future. But that's all in the mind, right? That's the mind creating a worry that it is expressed in the emotional body. Um, but I think in terms of the actual experience, those three crises actually feel kind of the same to me, as weird as it is to say. As much as the mind can say that the scale of the first two are so much important, in a way, I think there's something really deep about the third one, which is the fact that it's a lot more like honest and tangible and felt and also shared, right? Because when I see people, they might not agree with me about the peak oil thing or the metacrisis thing. They might not agree with me about that, but I think it's very clear when you really look at people and how they behave and how they talk and all that. there is something really like fundamentally lonely about a lot of people in post-internet era, you could say. But yeah, it's kind of interesting to think about and to just really listen to yourself, like how much of the real problem is simply a matter of being lonely. Like, is isn't that really the real problem of the society, right? Feel free to agree or disagree. I don't particularly care, honestly, but I would just invite people to think and feel. Probably feel more because people are so much thinking based to it. Yeah, that's about everything I'd say. I'm not really sure what was the theme for today. I guess this was like the sort of like pointless aspect of critique and you know trying to burn away a problem. But yeah, not really sure what we give a title. But yeah, thank you for listening, and I'll see you next time.